Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the New England Racing Show, Manchester, New Hampshire, Channel 23. We're also on YouTube, and like us on Facebook, and you'll get the show automatically every week. Well, I'm your host, Bill Sturgis. A week and a half ago, we went to the Racers Expo in Marlborough, Massachusetts, put on by Bobby Seymour. It's a hardcore racers show where they have a lot of vendors and a couple of cars on display, but it wasn't a race car show per se. It was all strictly hardcore racers that want to get to know different vendors, stuff they had for sale. And what we did was they had a media room off to the side, and they did interviews with different drivers, racetrack owners, promoters, and the such. And I had the privilege of taping all of those interviews. There was about 20 of them. So it came to about 3.5 hours. So the next 6 or 7 shows, that's all we're going to be showing you. There was only me and a couple of other people doing the taping the interviews. So this is the pretty much the only place you're going to get to see them. But they're very interesting. The first one we're going to do was like a little round table. They had 3 people: Pete Falconi, the announcer for NEMA, Steve Grant, the flagman for NEMA, and Kevin Boucher, who's the announcer down at Seekonk Speedway. So that's our first show here, and they just sit around and they shoot the breeze, and we taped it. It was pretty interesting. So let's go to that.
In Marlborough, Massachusetts, we're going to turn things over to the man in the middle. You know him as a veteran flagman around the racing circuits of New England. He's going to be the guest host of this segment, Mr. Steve Grant.
Thank you, Peter. And Kevin.
I'll let you...
Well, Kevin Boucher is with us tonight. He's the announcer at the Seekonk Speedway, and we're going to talk about the history of these announcers. So my interview should be fairly easy here, having 2 announcers on the side of me. Peter, we'll start with you, going back to the Westboro days, where you did it all over there with being assistant starter and announcing.
Yeah, I actually announced my first race when I was 12, and that came about because my job used to be that I would play the music between the races up in the announcer's booth. And like you, I always wanted to be a flagman. So the race director at the time put me down on the flag stand when I was 12 years old to flag my first race, and my father flipped out because that was back in the days when the flag stand was right down there beside the track. And he said, I don't want him down there. So I guess to appease me, he said, why don't you let him announce a race a night? So I started doing that, and the rest is history.
I flagged my first race at Westboro Speedway, too.
Wow.
My dad was on the stand. He says, can you handle these warm-ups? I said, sure. I don't know. I was 8 or 9 years old, and I went to wave the flag the first time, and it was stuck between my body and the rail. I couldn't even wave it. I couldn't get it over the rail to wave it. Yeah. And he was gone already, so I had to continue on. And then we got Kevin here, who's been at Seekonk forever, and I did work a few weeks or so at Seekonk myself. Kevin, go ahead.
Well, I started, it'll be 20 years this year.
Wow.
On the mic at Seekonk, and it all started, I grew up there. My father raced, was a car owner, and I just grew up there and learning the drivers, knowing the tracks, and it was on a whim. I was talking to Adrian when she was promoting the track, and I said, what's it going to take for me to get up in the announcer's booth? Jim Powers was up there, and she says, well, I don't know how you would sound. I said, I'd sound just like this. And she goes, all right, you got the job. And they had just put Victory Lane up in the grandstand that year. And my first job was doing Victory Lane interviews to the drivers that came up. And Jim had gotten sick that year, and they got me up there. I worked with Wally for a while, and been up there ever since.
One of the best, Wally.
I was very fortunate to work with him for a little bit.
He could get people booing and cheering, and
Well, so could Jim Powers,
Uh,
but for different reasons.
That's right. The Tower of Power.
the
Yeah.
Tower of Power, you never knew when he was going to spout out
That's
a
right.
national anthem or.
Sure. I remember Jim going all the way back to Norwood, which I don't know if that's where he actually started first calling races, but that's where I became familiar with him, at Norwood and Thompson back in the 60s.
I remember the first time he gave me the mic, he scared the ever-living crap out of me. Just made me nervous as heck, and, bumbling and stumbling and fumbling, and, it's funny the way you start, and 20 years later, here I am, still doing it.
Kevin, I announced one heat race at Seekonk Speedway, and I only knew 2 drivers in it. I knew everybody, but I only knew really 2, and it was
Yeah.
Freddie Estelle and Rick Martin. So the only 2 guys I talked about in the whole race was Rick Martin and Freddie Estelle, and it was like, I just said, I quit, I can't do this, and I was just going to hang out for the night, so I don't even want to be near this microphone.
Yeah.
And Peter we've been together, I don't know if we've been together 15 years now with Niemer.
Close to it anyway. Yeah. I took up
14.
the announcing job early in the 2000s for NEMA, and I guess I replaced Derek Perniciglio when he went south to pursue a TV career, and I was doing some announcing still at Lee Speedway, but the midgets intrigued me mainly because of the traveling and getting to go around to some different tracks as opposed to, being in the same booth every night, and it's been great.
It's a lot of fun. We
I
have a
got
lot
that
of fun
job
on
when
weekends.
Steve Grant was the president of the Northeast Midget
Exactly.
Association.
I think that was
actually.
probably right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You and I, and we've been together. We got a lot of miles on the Niemer tour for sure. Kevin, you worked at Lee Speedway too, didn't you?
Yep, I worked up there for 3 years, and, it was a real great time. Red and the family treated me great, the fans were great, the competitors, and it was a lot of fun. Just the travel was horrible, coming from south of Boston every Friday, going through that traffic. It took me 3 hours to get there and 2 hours to get home.
Yeah, well, that's what, I had been at Lee for 10 or 12 years as the regular announcer on Friday nights, and when my job changed and I ended up working in Boston, that's when I just couldn't do it anymore, because
Yeah.
even going from Boston to try to get to Lee on a Friday night
Yeah.
to make race time was tough.
I flagged Lee Speedway this year. Bob Watson asked me to come up and give him a hand, and I had to leave at 1:15.
Just to
And as we
just
were
beat the traffic.
as we were talking, he says, "If you flag for me, you don't have to do warm-ups." I said, "Beautiful." So I left at 1:15. If I left at 1:15, it was a 2.5-hour ride. So here I am, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I'm like, oh no, I don't want to do warm-ups. So I would stay, now that the season's over and I'm not working for Lee anymore, I would pull into Star Speedway and get under a tree and
Take
set
a
my
nap.
alarm clock for 6 o'clock, take a nap, and then go over to Lee. Great track, great people to work for. Unfortunately, that traffic is just, if I don't get out of the office in time, then it's a 4-hour trip for me.
Yeah.
On the way home, it's a nice ride, but unfortunately, it's so hard to get through that. There's no other way to get through Boston.
No.
Great track though, fast. The 350 Supers are really enjoyable up there.
Yeah.
And Peter, you do New Hampshire too, international.
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to be on the announcing team at Loudon. Been there for almost 20 years. I was actually working at Lee when I got asked to go up and would I work with Al Robinson, who was the announcer there at the time, and I used to go to the races to watch at Loudon, and was thrilled to move up there. So it's a long weekend, but it's a good time.
Well, I was one time going through Boston on a weekend. I'm just going through stations, and I said, I know that SOB is on the radio right now. That's him. That's him. So I called him up, and I said, "Is that you?" I said, I hear you on the radio. And he said, yeah, I'm on a radio station doing oldies. And then, he said, stay on the radio, I'm going to say something. And he said, stay away from Steve Grant, he's going through 95, he's out of his mind right now. But yeah, I picked up the voice on the radio, I said, son of a gun, that's him. But it's a lot of fun. I mean, announcing is so important to racing.
It is, and even being in it 20 years, I enjoy it when Pete comes, because you always pick up a little something. John Spence comes to Seekonk, when Ben comes to do the Open Wheel Wednesdays, or even if I go to different tracks and listen to the announcers, you always pick up on their bad habits, but you can also pick up on their good, and geez, I could use that, or that sounds good the way he used it, and you try to incorporate it into your style.
Right.
Because I remember I worked with one announcer who told me, and he never impressed me. I wasn't that big of a fan of listening to him, but he told, you want to emulate me, and this and that, and I'm thinking to myself, there's no way. But I remember what Wally always said, don't be Wally, don't be Jim Powers, be the best Kevin you can be. And that was key because it helped me create my own style. Just like when you started, Pete, you listened to a lot more announcers than I did over the years. Chris Schenkel, I'm sure you were able to listen to over the years when he was announcing, and many others through that era. It's amazing what you pick up and what you hear and what you use 20 years down the line.
Well, I think I remember being at Thompson Speedway, it was Bill Walsh. I think that's what his name was, right?
Bill Welch was announced at Thompson for a long time back when I was a kid. A guy who used to drive by the name of Joe Ross was announcing at Thompson when I was a kid. But I think one of the key points is that like in Kevin's case, the voice of Seekonk Speedway, you have to be the link between the speedway and the drivers and the fans. The speedways work pretty hard to put the non-race fan in the seats. You have to today because you can't get a crowd of just race fans. There aren't enough of them to go around to all the racetracks. So you have to market the racing as another form of entertainment. Now, these people come to the races and maybe their only exposure has been to see racing on Sunday afternoon on Fox or ESPN. And this is nothing like it when they go to Seekonk Speedway or Lee Speedway or Thompson Speedway. So the announcer really has to pull it all together for people so that they don't go out of there going, what did I just see? And I think you'd agree with that, Kevin.
You're right, because when TV first started becoming mainstream, they used to dumb down the races, is what the mainstream term was. They used to dumb it down for the non-race fans. And you almost have to do that to a point where you're giving the basic instructions to people where, you know what, this isn't a 500-lap race. It's a 30-lap sprint. There are no pit stops unless they crash. You got 3 different divisions depending on the speedway. And it's a lot more exciting, but it can be a lot more confusing. And if you can't tell them what's going on and explain to them in a way that they'll understand, you're right, they'll walk out of there going, I'm lost.
I saw something very different when we went to the Civic Center and saw the indoor TQs, where first time I really saw it was they took the time. The announcer says, and the green flag, and the starter waved the green flag is to start the race. The yellow flag for caution, so on and so on. But they went through all the flags, and then they went to Atlantic City. They did the same thing there. So that really helped possibly the person that says, hey, let's racing, let's go on. We're going to get off track a little bit, but one of our problems, I think, is on the road right now, everything's enclosed trailers. All the good stuff
I'll agree
is
with you 100%.
enclosed, but the junk is in open trailers, and they're like, I'm not going there to watch that. What they're missing the boat on is what's inside them trailers. And some of
that's part of it, but also back in the 70s and the 60s, every corner had a garage. Think about all the racetracks that have closed since the early 70s.
Oh, jeez.
And the old adage is when the racetrack closes, you lose 80% of the competitors. So those local garages closed up. They don't have the race cars anymore, or they just got out of racing. So you're not getting that kid riding by on a bike and saying, ooh, it's a race car. What is that?
Yeah.
Let me go take a look at it. And you're right. The other thing is going down the street. How many people from our generation and before say, I got into it because I saw the car going down the highway, and I followed it to see where it was going.
Yeah.
And that got me hooked. You don't get that anymore.
No, we don't. And it's just a changing of times. Right now, and I'm going to get off track again, and we'll stay off track, and we'll just go open here, but Niemer has an opportunity with these young kids, and Seekonk also has some young divisions there, the 600, the mini cups, where there's still parents and aunts and uncles and cousins that are coming to watch the next superstar. This is Jeff Gordon. He's really good. He's going to Daytona. So as long as we capture this youth that we have right now, I think it's very important. Because midgets lost a generation.
Oh,
let's face it.
Yeah.
I mean, that generation that was building them in the backyards and the old Niemer that whole generation is has passed on. So the next generation, we lost a generation somewhere relying on our past. So now we got to grab, as Seekonk does, the youth and keep them active and keep them, we focus on them and make them believe in what they're doing.
Yeah, and NEMA Lights has been great with that, seeing the growth with that division, and them moving up into the NEMA Midgets, into other, and beyond.
Into the modifieds,
Yep.
you know, Anthony
Nocella.
he got a modified win. He's done a great job, and we got the Sturgises who do 350 Supers. It's just, you know, you just see the growth going on.
Yep.
Our NEMA Light champion, Medeiros, Carl Jr., he's moving on to the modifieds this year.
Yep.
So it's a place where you can learn how to race, where the edge is not so wide, and you can really race these cars. They're fast.
Yep.
And then you get the experience, and if you want to move up to open wheel racing, it's there for you. But also, if you want to move on to pro stocks, modifieds,
Well,
350.
a nice tie-in with the Sierra division is Carl started with the Sierra division.
Yes, he did, sure.
Before moving up into the NEMA Lights. And we've seen a lot of drivers come from that division, our Sierra division, on a Friday night, and not only go into NEMA Lights or the late models and the pro stocks and the other divisions at Seekonk, but you look at the Ricciardi brothers, who ran the Pro 4 modifieds for years, started there. Tommy Ellis was working down south. He started with the Sierra division. Matt Dusenberry, who started with our Sierra division, he's the PR rep for Kozlowski now. So, you know, the growth with the youth, it's giving them more avenues as well, not just driving, but you want to be a crew member or a car chief or in the media somehow, or stay involved with the sport moving up. There's opportunity there.
Well, and I think this is why this is a good sport for the youth, because they not only get to drive the cars, they work on them. They learn a lot about mechanics. They learn a lot about sportsmanship. They know that they, as opposed to if they're playing baseball, they just got to show up with their cleats and their bat. Yeah, they got to practice during the week, but keep themselves in shape. But a kid that's driving a race car not only has to do all that, show up with the equipment, be ready to go, stay safe, stay in good shape, but he's got to work on the thing during the week too.
The good part about both of these divisions we're talking about right now is that the engines are reliable.
Yes.
So they're not spending a lot of time on the engines. They're working on trying to make them handle, and so they don't have to focus on working on a motor. They can work on, you know, doing the weights and just gradually working onto it, and that's a good thing for any kid that's starting out in racing or a family. I saw a couple at the show today that they're just starting out, and they're coming over to the Seekonk Speedway, but they don't know a lot about it, but at least they got an engine that they can fire up, and it's not like something so complicated that if it goes wrong, it goes real
Well,
bad.
another part that I see is there was a whole period of time where nobody would help anybody. If you're new getting into it, they didn't want to spend the time to help you out because it was taking away from them, or that you could get better and beat them, and they didn't want that animosity. Now it's people are bending over backwards to help other people, and I see that with the NEMA and NEMA Lights. I see that with the Sierra division, because without those cars and competitors, there's no division.
I've seen it for many years with NEMA, though, because we travel so far and we can't start these up in garages, that they do kind of jump in, and everybody, we need the cars. So if you're not going to help a guy when we're out in New York, he ain't coming back.
Yep.
But so everybody jumps in, and you know, it's a traveling family, so we got to rely on each other. But all right, so let's get back to this announcement deal now. You guys have been doing this for a very long time. Do we keep going for this, or you got any other plans, or are you just going to be announcing?
I don't really have any other plans. I mean, part of me always wanted to try MRN, but by the time I started announcing, I was getting married and starting a family, so the travel didn't work for me. So I stayed at Seekonk, and I mean, before I knew it, I'm here 20 years. I did a little traveling with the Granite State Pro Stocks over the past couple of years, and a great experience. But you know what? Seekonk's my home, and
My home also.
I'm waiting for Pete to invite me up in New Hampshire so I can put that on my resume. But you know, I can't see any more.
You know, one thing about you guys, there's only so much talking that can be done. So he's not giving up his mic to you. I can tell you that right now. And if you were up there, you're not going to say, "Hey, come on up here."
Oh, you're absolutely
right. Because you're yackers. How about you, Peter? How long are you going to continue traveling with this Niemer.
I love it. It's a lot of guys go off and play golf on Saturday in the summertime. I jump in the car and go to the races, and I enjoy it. Of course, my family's involved. I got a nephew that has run late models at Thompson for a number of years, and dabbled in the American Canadian Tour last year, and is going to run a handful of races with that division this year, so I'll go to some of those races. And then I've got another nephew who now got hooked on midget racing and has been running Paul Scally's NEMA Light, and he's hoping to run the whole season this year with the NEMA Light. So it actually turns out to kind of be a family thing for me.
All right, so both of you. We travel a lot, Kevin.
Yes.
You're in Rehoboth and you're going to Seekonk Speedway.
12 minutes with traffic.
If I go to Seekonk Speedway, I got a 14-minute trip too. But Peter, honestly, there's some days it's 96 degrees. We haven't even left our house yet, and we're gonna go
Right. Well,
Oswego or
the worst
Oxford
is
or Beechridge.
driving 6 hours, and 5.5 hours into the trip it starts to rain.
Yeah.
And you get to the track just enough to see them closing the ticket booth going, rained out, and you turn around and go home again.
At least we got cell phones now. That's one thing that's good about cell phones, because one time I went to Star Speedway, no cell phones back then, and I get there and there's a big lake there. I never saw one car heading back, or I would have turned around. Like when my dad was flying and we're going somewhere, start seeing midgets going the other way, just jump in the next exit and head back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've made the trip too, where it's just a big lake at Star, and there's a guy that never cancels on rain, and it's like, wow, this is bad. I'm the only one here. I keep forgetting we're getting interviewed here. I'm going to let some bad ones go.
They shut the camera off a while ago.
Oh, all right.
Just talking.
But there's no better person that, I can, some nights, we joke around a lot, Kevin, and I'll say, hey, listen, I got some people on the stand, build me up tonight.
Yeah.
And we have some laughs about cigars and...
Well, but I will say this. We talked a few minutes ago about the announcer being the link between the fans and the show, and educating them about what it's about. But I gotta give some credit to the flag man, and particularly to Steve Grant, who, when we grew up in racing, Kevin, and you'll agree, we saw some pretty spectacular guys out on the flag stand. They were part of the show. And no offense to the guys that are out there these days, but they're not so much a part of the show as it used to be, with the exception of Steve Grant, who still is a flashy flagman to watch on the flag stand. And I think, so I make note of that when I'm announcing those races, because it's something the fans should be keeping an eye on.
When I remember somebody, and I can't remember who told me a long time ago, the two most important people at a racetrack is your announcer and your starter. Because your announcer brings everything is your ringleader. The announcer brings everything to the field. But the flagman is the one everybody's watching.
Would you repeat that for Mike Scrivani, please?
Yes. Why we're talking pay raises here.
That's right.
Lou Boyd said it best, I think, he said that a bad starter and a bad announcer is like having a warm beer at a racetrack.
Yep.
It sucks.
You're right. Because I've gone to the races and listened to the announcers and fallen asleep. If you get a long green flag run in a 200-lap race and they're just blaring about, hey, you got one of those cars too, and I've heard this at some prominent racetracks, and you're going, what the heck are they talking about? This has nothing to do with the product. And you sit there going, are you kidding me? And the flagger's just standing there, and I used to love watching Billy Ryder up on the flag stand, because he'd be doing time trials and it looks like he was flagging the last lap of the Indy 500 every single time. And he brought that flamboyant, like you do, Steve, out on the track throwing the green flag for the midgets. You don't see that in the young kids anymore.
I don't recommend it either. I mean, starting on a track is, that happened, Kevin, I'll tell you how that all happened. I'm driving with my dad up to Star Speedway. He says, well, you can't start them from the track because you ain't got any good drivers like I used to have. I'm like, oh, really? So we got to Star Speedway, we had a driver's meeting, I said, by the way, I'm starting from the track tonight. And they're like, we got no runoff here. I said, doesn't matter, I'm starting from the track. And he was there, he didn't know what was going on. And on the way home, I said, I guess I got pretty good drivers too, Dad. And that's how I started with it. But Seekonk, they kind of drive away from you there.
Yeah.
So it might look exciting from the stands, but from where I am, I'm in a pretty safe spot, and I get a lot of trust in what we're doing.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, if the first and second row I don't agree with, I ain't doing it.
I don't.
So
Yeah.
I look at that first and second row. If that first and second row ain't gonna get going, and third and fourth row are gonna be looking for a spot, we'll do it on another day. But Seekonk is one place that's my home track where I really like putting us to put on a good show.
Yeah.
So he knows what I'm gonna do probably before I know what I'm gonna do. We've been together for so long, and it's just been for me. Damn, I hope this is my last year. I really do. I've retired 8 or 9 times. I mean, I've been fired.
You notice we didn't ask you that. You brought it up.
Yeah.
So about that pay raise, Mike.
Yeah, right.
Don't worry about it. But the traveling is getting so. I mean, I don't have that. I stopped thinking about them 90-degree days. We're traveling all over New England and New York this year, where it is just doesn't seem like there's a break for us. Just say, good 3 days at Seekonk, 3 at Star, 3 at Lee. Them days are over. So we're reaching out, and we'd like to get back to Seekonk a little more, Francis. But I was just there and joking around with them. But what do you think?
Well, the traveling stuff, there's no question, but it's a lot tougher for somebody that's got to tow a race car and a trailer, on a diesel truck and pay the tolls for multi-axle and all that. So,
Well, last year I asked Mike for a raise because I said, we're traveling more, Mike, I need a raise. And they call me an SOB. He says, you travel with me in the camper for free.
Well, that's why I'll never go to the powers that be at NEMA and go, geez, it's a long trip. Could you get me a room? Because the answer is going to be, why don't you just stay in Scrivani's motorhome with 12 other people?
You don't want to do that.
Nah, forget it. I'll sleep in the car.
But you'll have fun right up to a certain point.
Yeah.
But, the NEMA, Seekonk, I grew up on this. My grandfather was a midget mechanic. And how my father got started, he was a mechanic. He had a track in Fall River. And they thought it was evil. And they wouldn't let my father go. So when he went to bed.
Ponta Delgado?
Ponta Delgado, exactly, Kevin. And when he went to bed, he'd go down the second floor. He'd go down the drain pipe and go watch it from the outside, then run back home before my grandfather got home. My grandfather actually served the concession stand out in turn 1 and 2. He was there too, and I used to think he'd give me stuff for free. He'd shake my head every time I went. Hey, Grampy, can I get a pizza? And he'd shake his head like he was paying for it the whole time. I thought, hey, my father's flagging. I got a guy giving me pizza, and my grandfather's getting, life is good. But I didn't know how mad he was all night long when I keep going back there. I was getting friends pizza. I'll get you pizza, But
All right.
what we learn along the way, right?
One of the neatest things I've learned over the years, and you've seen this a lot more than I have, or I shouldn't say over the years, the last couple of years traveling with the Granite Stage, going to these different tracks that I've never been to, but seeing their facilities and they're announcing PA equipment and everything else, and you sit back and go, how do they do it with this?
Yeah.
It's like they got a microphone and a bullhorn
That's right.
at some of these racetracks, and you sit back and think of what you got back at home, and go, wow, and I thought that was bad.
Well, and at the same time, we do show up at some racetracks and say, what a facility this is, too. Seekonk's one of them that we like to go to. It's perfect for us, and I'm not trying to get a show here. We're talking about facilities. And there's many of them are out there, in not to name tracks, but when we go there and say, wow, this is good, they treat us nice, too. And we get a good, warm, fuzzy feeling there, right? So,
Well, we're looking forward to 2014.
as I am, and Kevin,
Yeah.
you'll be firing up soon. So.
We'll see you at Seekonk. We'll
I'll
be
be
there.
looking for you.
All
I've got a
right.
microphone for
And
you.
I didn't think I'd get a word in with these two guys. I
Yeah,
guess it worked
well.
out pretty well. All right, we're signing off now, and this is Pete Falconi. And Kevin, when's your season start?
Starts on May 4th.
May 4th. For us, it's the 29th and 30th, or 28th and
of
29th
March.
of March at the Waterford Speed
If
Bowl.
the snow melts.
If the snow melts, we'll be at the Waterford Speed Bowl,
Yep,
where we're fast, but not NEMA fast. We're NEMA fast, right, Peter?
that's right.
All right, thank you.
Well, that was a interesting discussion between Flagman and 2 announcers. And I just wanted to make note that Steve Grant, the man in the middle there, the flagman for NEMA, and his dad, Earl Grant, passed away last week. And he was a famous starter also. And I remember seeing him, and what he would do is, if he didn't like the lineup when they were coming around to take the green, he'd turn his back on the field and stand there, and they'd said, You didn't want to come around again and have him turn his back on you a second time. So our condolences to Steve Grant and his family for the passing of his dad. Well, we're going to have, we have 23 other interviews. We have some track promoters from Waterford, Thompson Speedway, Star Speedway, Lee Speedway, and Seekonk. We also have a lot of great drivers. I'll just run through a couple here. We have Chris Purley, multi-time is international super modified champ. We have Otto Sitterly from Oswego, multi-time champ. And a lot of late model drivers and pro stock drivers. Too many to mention here. We only have a few seconds. So we're just going to keep continuing this for the next 4 or 5 weeks with these great interviews. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.